All right. Welcome once again, my friends, to another episode of the Red Delta Project podcast. We are simplifying fitness by taking a fundamental approach to diet and exercise, giving you more power, control, and freedom over your healthy lifestyle. As always, I'm Matt Schifferly, and this episode is sponsored by all of the resources recommended through these podcasts, the Red Delta Project Library, including books like Micro Workouts, my brand new book, Suspension Calisthenics, the Grind Style Calisthenics Workout Program, which is on the playlist here for the YouTube channel. The Grind Style Calisthenics Program, of course, is one of the most direct ways to building muscle and strength with purely bodyweight training. And it's a fully free program. It's a year-long program, all for free. All the videos are on the playlist there, as well as other companies that I highly recommend you check out, like NOSC for high-quality, affordable suspension equipment, and WorldFit, who makes some of the best isometric equipment out there as well. And I mention all this stuff because I'm sure we're going to be covering a lot of these sorts of things in the next episode, because what we're talking about today are false positives or false flags. These are things that fool us all into thinking at one point or another, oh, that was a good workout, or oh, that was a really satisfying workout. I'm sure it was effective and it really moved the needle towards what you're hoping to accomplish in your workouts. But in reality, these 6 things don't really mean much of anything at all. In fact, they can be very distracting and pull your attention away from the 3 things that are most important for an effective workout, which I'll also be covering a little bit later on. So folks are coming on in. Michael from Drop Weight Daddy in the house as well. Folks are going to be asking questions. Good to see you, Snifferat, Alexis H as well. So covering number 1. Number 1 is sweat. Sweating. I get this a lot, especially from some clients when I first meet them, because one of the things that you learn as a trainer almost sometimes the ugly hard way is that when people are like, yeah, I'm in great shape, I'm in wonderful shape, I want you to give me a really good workout, and you give them something that is seemingly just a light warm-up, and they're like on the floor gasping for breath in a puddle of their own blood, sweat, and tears, and they're like, oh man, holy smokes. So usually as a good coach, I played a little conservative when I first start training people, and I don't push them too hard or what I think is too hard, and then we ramp up over time. But sometimes what happens with this is people are like, oh, but I didn't sweat in the workout, or I didn't get enough sweat, so it couldn't have been a good workout. Or sometimes people will say to me, oh, I sweat so much, I'm sure that's a sign that I'm burning a lot of fat and calories and stuff. And like a lot of things on this list, the thing that we're looking to as a sign of an effective workout is sort of maybe roughly correlated with what we're trying to accomplish, but it's so loosely removed from it that it doesn't really mean what we think it means. And sweating is certainly one of those cases. Because what is sweating? Sweating is nothing more than our body's ability to try and regulate temperature in a warmer, hotter environment. And that's all it is. It is not an indication at all of how much work you're doing, how much effort you're putting in, how many calories you're burning, or whether or not you're burning fat. It's just literally a thing in your body saying, it's hot, I got to try to keep myself cool. I mean, here in Denver, we're going through a heat wave like much of the world right now, and it's like 100 degrees out. I'm going to break a sweat walking out to check the mail. Does that mean that I've had a great workout just going out to check the mail? Conversely, I've had workouts where it's nice and cool outside, it's overcast, protecting me from that Denver sun, and I barely sweat at all, even though I just got a great workout in. So no, sweating is not an indication that anything has happened other than you just got pretty hot. And even some people will say that if you have a lot of sweat kind of building up and falling off you, then it's not effective use of that sweat, because we cool ourselves not by sweating, but by having that sweat evaporate. That's why a lot of times we sweat more easily when it's in more humid conditions. Like when I go down to visit my parents in Florida, I'm just standing outside and it's like, God, I got to change my shirt already. I'm sweating like crazy because it's 100% humidity down there. And we're sweating so much because it doesn't evaporate very well. And therefore we're not cooling, and it just creates this endless cycle and more sweating. Versus here in Denver, it's as dry as the desert, because technically we are classified as a high desert. So we sweat a lot less in most hot conditions. You can be outside when it's 85 degrees and still not sweat a whole heck of a lot, which is very comfortable when I'm out mountain biking. So sweating, yes, it does kind of feel a little bit satisfying. It's a good thing to feel like, oh, I got my sweat on, it feels very cathartic and cleansing and stuff, but it doesn't mean anything other than you're trying to stay cool, and that's it. It's not something to base your effective workout on. Mariano is in the house. How's it going, my friend? Good afternoon. Greetings to the RDP community, he says. Good to see you, folks. So that's number one, is sweating. Not a good indication of whether or not you had a good workout. Number two, and this one I get questions a lot on, is muscle soreness. And people are like, oh, I didn't get sore muscles in this workout, or I can never make this muscle sore. Is that an indication it's not working? Not really at all. See, soreness is usually an indication of some sort of muscle damage going on. It's just as if I just ran up and just punched you really hard in the shoulder, and then the next day you're like, oh man, my shoulder's really sore. That's literally what it is you have damaged your muscles. And there are easier and harder ways to make this happen. And I know a lot of times people are like, yeah, damage the muscles. Yes, good, awesome. That's what's contributing to getting bigger and stronger. But these days, that theory is kind of falling a little bit out of favor. If anything, a lot of the experts in the research is kind of pointing towards, we don't necessarily want to discredit and say soreness has nothing to do with adaptation, but it's probably not as directly correlated as we think it is. Because there's certainly plenty of examples where people will damage their muscles like crazy and nothing comes of it. You don't get bigger, you don't get stronger, you just get damaged. And so sometimes you can have a damaged muscle and not create a stimulus for change and to get bigger and stronger. And other times you can create a very strong stimulus for change and not have hardly any damage at all, and therefore suffer very little of that soreness. And there's several reasons for this. One is just how are you conditioned to the actual exercise you're doing. So as some people have said, is you get results from exposing your muscles to an effective stimulus, which I'll cover in a little bit. But you get sore because you expose your muscles to a novel stimulus. In other words, they're doing something new or something they're not quite used to. It doesn't mean it's actually effective. It just simply means, oh, this was a little bit of something different. And sometimes that can also be something of a different take on an exercise you're doing, like speed, power, or especially this one is getting a muscle to contract very forcefully under an elongated position. I've had clients who literally refuse to do Romanian deadlifts, where your legs are relatively straight. There's still a little bend in your knees, and you hinge at the hips and you come down. And they're like, I will not do those. I'm sore for a week afterwards. My hamstrings are so incredibly hit from that I can barely walk every time we do it. And that's because it's a classic example of how to create a lot of damage in your muscles. Is take a muscle, stretch it out a whole lot, and then contract it very, very hard. And that's going to create a lot of those muscular tears, a lot of inflammation, a lot of soreness, and therefore you feel it more the next day. Versus if you did something with the same muscle, contracted it really hard and worked it really hard, but you didn't have as much elongation, or it's not so novel that your muscle's totally blown over by it, you can create a very strong stimulus, but hardly feel it at all. In fact, if anything, there's some theories out there that suggest that you probably are going to have an easier time telling your muscles to get bigger and stronger if you can get them to a point where you can work them hard without them getting sore. Because think of it this way, you've got so many resources for your muscles to be able to adapt and recover after a workout. But the more damaged they are, the more they have to put those resources into just getting back to baseline, to where they were before. But if you weren't terribly damaged, but you really effectively trained your muscles, now you can use those resources to effectively build the muscle to be better than it was before. So it's kind of like, are you using resources to repair, or are you using resources to grow? And theoretically, the less repair you have to do, the better, in order to increase your chances of that growth. Now, I'm not exactly on the side of like, you don't want to be sore or anything like that. Of course not. My quads right now are sore from some sissy squats and some isometric lunges I did yesterday. I posted a video of it on my Instagram, and it was such a satisfying workout. And I've got a little of that soreness going on in my legs today, and it feels really good. So I'm taking the enjoyment of that soreness for sure. But at the same time, I'm not pursuing the soreness. Like if I don't get sore or anything, I don't worry about it. It's not an indication that you've done anything other than damaged your muscles. And in many ways, damage could potentially inhibit your ability to adapt to be better, faster, and stronger than before. So soreness, good thing when you have it. It's like satisfying, but don't put too much stock into it. Hey, Tim Toons asking a good question here. Let's jump into this. Hey, Matt, why isn't it so important that the next set has a big drop off, like 10, 7, or 3? He's talking about the backfilling strategy. It's not that important, actually. It's perfectly fine to do sets of like 10, 10, and 10. And it all depends on how you're managing fatigue with that sort of thing. So if you're, let's say you're doing pull-ups and you get 10 on your first set, 10 on your second set, and 9 on your third set, right? So what that does is it tells me that your first set was 10, but you didn't push it that hard into the red zone. You stopped well short of failure. And therefore, you had plenty of energy and you could get 10 on the second set. And that second set, you're pushing it pretty good, maybe feeling like you're close to your limit. And then the third one, you're like, okay, all I got was 9. Like that's all I could get out of it. And I know you're at your limit. But when we have a drop off, like in this example of 10, 7, and 3, that's telling me that you really pushed a lot into that 10 to get those 10 reps in that first set. So you only had the energy to get 7, and then you pushed so hard on that 7th, in the second set for 7, that you only had enough to get 3. It kind of depends on what you're going for in your workout. Both are perfectly fine, as we'll explore in a little bit. It doesn't really matter how you go about doing this, but in my backfilling strategy in the grind style calisthenics, I'm not looking to pace myself. I don't want to reserve reps in the tank. I want to give a lot of effort into every set. So when you go 10, 7, 3, then that's a lot of effort, a lot of effort again. But with the backfilling strategy, remember, you keep the first set or two the same for every workout, even though you're getting stronger. So you get 10, 7, and let's say 5 on the next workout. So what that's telling me is you did 10, although that 10 was easier than the first time you did it. So you could have probably done more, but you didn't. You saved a little bit. Then you got 7, and then effectively the amount of energy or effort you can put into it spills over into the other sets until you're all around roughly, 10, 9, 9, or 10, 10, 10 kind of area. And then you can progress from there. It's just another progression strategy, and it's usually a lot easier than just always going all out as well. Good question. Very, very good. Henry Miller saying hi from Detroit. Good to see you, Henry. Thank you very much for coming on in. And quick question here. Dan Jones asking, what's your favorite sandbag exercise? I love doing leg work with sandbags just because you can really, manhandle it with both arms and hold on to it. So sandbag lunges, sandbag squats, sandbag reverse lunges, that sort of thing are very, very good. I also really like sandbag. I don't know if you'd really call them deadlifts. They're more of like sandbag hip hinges. Lots of times when I'm working with clients and they just can't quite get that hip hinge movement, it's a lot harder to learn when the arms are hanging down and they're holding on to a kettlebell or a barbell or something. But when you hold on to a sandbag in like a clutched position to your chest, this inherently keeps the back much straighter, the shoulders are packed, and you're just kind of hugging it to you. And then pretty much the only way you can bend over, as long as you're keeping your back relatively straight, is the hinge. And so now then they're like, oh, this is what a hip hinge is all about. Oh, wow, this feels amazing. And the weight is really nice and high up on the chest. So you don't need a lot of weight, like a 30, 40-pound sandbag works really well. And it's a great way to teach people the hip hinge and a good way to work that extension chain. So those are my favorite sandbag exercises. So let's get back on track here. So false flag number 3, and this is one that I very much fell for back in the day, is time, duration, how long you are working out. And this also goes along with the idea of I did a certain amount of work, like I did 100 reps, or I did 5 sets of this exercise and stuff. We're basically basing our workout on how much work we're doing. But once again, this is kind of like, well, maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't. But your muscles don't care necessarily to a large degree how long your workout is. You could work out for hours and not make much happen. Believe me, I've done it. You can also work out for a relatively short period of time and make a lot happen. Again, I've done it. And the idea behind my whole micro workouts approach is that when you understand specifically what you're trying to accomplish in your workout, you're not basing your workout on time of I've got to work out for an hour or anything. It's just what's my mission, what's my objective, and then just taking however long it takes to get that done. Sometimes it's going to be several hours. If I go out here into my backyard to the Rocky Mountains and I'm like, I'm going to bag a 14er, that's going to take many hours. When we rode our bicycles up Pikes Peak, which was crazy, That took me nearly 3 hours of constantly going uphill to get it done. I wasn't going to stop riding at like 45 minutes because the job wasn't done. But on the other hand, I'm not going to force myself to do a workout for an hour if after 25 minutes, I'm like, mission accomplished. I'm done. I'm not going to fill time with just random exercises and bloat out my workout. So while duration can be something to kind of judge things by, sometimes our goal is to do something for a duration. Like I want to be able to run for an hour without stopping, or I want to be able to go up Lookout Mountain in under 30 minutes, which is a famous bike ride out here, which I've been able to do once. Then it's time specific, of course, because time is part of the goal. It's a performance metric. But for the most part, we don't want to base our workouts on a certain amount of time. This is one of the things that kind of I don't really like about my field as being a personal trainer is a lot of times when we have these hour-long sessions, right? You got to have an hour-long session and everything. And most of the time, like I can get this done with this individual, what they need to do in 40 minutes. So sometimes I will find myself going like, all right, I guess I just got to give you some random crap to do. Or I'll change gears and be like, let's talk nutrition, let's talk recovery. I'll fill it with something, but as far as the workout goes, it kind of unsettles with me, this idea of like, I've got to just stretch this thing out so it's an hour-long workout. And I know for a lot of people, it's like, I don't need an hour. They don't need an hour, but they've paid for an hour, so I've got to somehow fill that time. And I don't like that very much. I'd rather just be more objective focused on what are we trying to accomplish and get it done, not in a rush, but at the same time, not bloating things out either. Let's see, here we go. Ben asking, hey Matt, if I do a 5,000 cheat meal per month, I'm thinking 5,000 calories, how much will be stored as fat? No way to tell, my friend. So here's one of the biggest misconceptions about calories is that we think we can get a bead on it as far as like, on one side, it is true. Calories in, calories out. It is just like money in a bank. You put in more than you're taking out, you're going to gain weight and vice versa. So a lot of us get this false impression, and maybe this could be like a false flag of a dietary thing of like, okay, I just ate this many calories, so what is my body going to do with it? But the fact of the matter is calorie balance is notoriously difficult to understand and even track. Even under the best circumstances in a lab, it's extremely difficult to do, which is why these ideas, like you come across this stuff all the time of like, you eat a single M&M and you have to walk like 50 miles to burn it off or something crazy. I know that's an exaggeration, but you get that idea. I remember in a health class when I was a kid, we did exactly that. We were each given something like 5 M&Ms or something, and then we were having to walk around the track until we effectively burned it off. So we kind of got an idea of, how much calories are in a single M&M and how much exercise I have to do in order to burn it off. But the fact of the matter is that's not at all how calorie balance works, because you have lots of different things contributing to your caloric expenditure. Your base metabolic rate, for example, your thermic effect of food, and of course, your physical activity. And one of the biggest aspects of physical activity isn't even exercise. It's what they call NEAT, N-E-A-T, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So as I'm talking to you now, I'm doing this with my hands. I'm fidgeting. I'm kind of getting my stuff, set here, and I got my water, and I'm moving things around, and I'm standing. This is burning calories more than if I was just sitting here and just kind of staying still. I was always a fidgeter as a kid. Drove my sister crazy. I'd be sitting there in the airplane, and I'd be like, tray up, tray down, tray up, tray down, tray up, tray down. She's like, stop moving. I'm like, I can't stop moving. So when it comes to understanding calorie balance, whenever we have a number like 5,000 calories and stuff, what is this going to do? What is this going to mean? It's anybody's guess. Who the hell knows? So I would say don't worry too much about it. And I'll go into it in more detail in a different video or something like that. But I'm never a big fan of this idea of cheat meals and stuff like that. 5,000 calories, like I'll eat that in a day, no problem sometimes. And I don't worry about it. I'm not thinking how much do I have to work out to burn this off and how much could be stored as fat and stuff like, yep, I just ate an entire large pizza. Okay, on to the next day. I don't worry about that stuff at all due to my healthy eating strategies. I don't worry about calories. I don't worry about weight gain. I don't worry about fat storage. I don't have to concern myself at all with any of that. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, that must be nice. No, believe me, it's awesome, because I used to have to worry about that stuff. And boy, I am glad I left those days behind. All right, so number 4, false positive number 4. This one gets a lot of folks because it's kind of what I'm talking about now, is following the formula, the right formula. So this goes along the ideas of like, okay, in order for me to have my effective workout, I got to science the shit out of it. I'm going to have the perfect number of sets and the reps. And I've got my incline bench press and then my tricep extensions. And I wait exactly 32.6 seconds in between sets for my muscles to work, to recover optimally. And on every third Tuesday of the fourth blue moon, I go with the different angle and the grip in order to hit the heads at every single angle. No, okay. A lot of this stuff, and I've seen coaches do this all the time, and I'm like, seriously, dude, do you really think those details are going to matter to Mrs. Smith over there who just wants to lose 20 pounds for her cruise coming up next year? Like, no, she doesn't need to attack the triceps from every angle and have the optimized workout program. And the reason for I'm bringing this up is, of course, you want to have some sort of a plan, some sort of a program. Absolutely. But when we think we've got the optimized plan and program down to every little detail, there's no guarantee that any plan is ever going to get you what you want of any kind, because you can science and tweak and get the formula as if you're trying to do high-level math on a chalkboard every time you plan your workouts and still be totally off base with what you need to do. But on the same time, you could just be like, oh, commercial break, time to go do some push-ups, and just bang out push-ups until you're like, okay, that's a good number. How many did you do? Well, fuck all. I don't care. Whatever. 40. I don't know. And create a very strong stimulus for change. So the numbers are a good thing, but they're not necessarily going to save you from yourself. I eat 5,000 calories. What's going to happen? Damned if I know. I don't know. It could be the greatest thing for you. You could need a 5,000 calorie diet and stuff. And again, I'll explain why this matters in a little bit when I talk about the 3 things you do need to focus on. But no, I'm not going to be able to tell if your workout is effective just because of the formula that you're following, because you could have any formula and have it mean nothing. But at the same time, you could oftentimes have almost no formula. I get this question sometimes where people will email me and stuff, and they're like, dude, I just see these guys working out in the park. They don't log their workouts. They're not tracking anything. They're not going by a formula or sets and reps. They just get on the pull-up bar and they just do whatever and they're jacked. Like, yeah, it can still happen even if you're not following a formula. But we don't want to feel like, well, I'm following the formula that's supposed to work. Not necessarily. You could still falter very much just because you think you followed the formula, when in reality, Mother Nature doesn't give a damn how many sets and reps you did. So have a plan, but don't necessarily feel like the formula is going to save you from yourself. Excuse me. Next question, Leroy the man. Good to see you, Leroy. Matt, is there such a thing as a certain lifting program aren't built for the general public, like the Bulgarian method, where you max out every day? Is this only exclusive towards performance-enhancing athletes, top 1%? You're on the right track. Yes, definitely. So a lot of times when we are basing our perceptions on what people are doing, like professional athletes or the top 1%ers you see on social media, like, God, look at that person's physique and look at what they can do and stuff. That individual has been filtered out through years and years of programs and coaches and stuff to get to that point. One of the classic examples was, I remember back in like the 90s and early 2000s, the big thing was Russian weightlifting programs. And they're like, look at this Russian, what he's doing. And oh my gosh, it's absolutely brutal and it's absolutely destroying. Holy smokes, it's so incredibly squatting heavy and maxing out every day kind of thing. And they're like, well, we got to train like the Russians sort of thing. And come to find out, the reason why we saw those individuals was because those programs left a trail of destruction behind them. Thousands and thousands of potential athletes were absolutely wrecked and destroyed by that type of program. And by the time we were watching the World Games and the Olympics and stuff, you're watching the 5 guys who, for whatever reason, had the right genetic makeup to make it through that program. It's kind of like the extreme military training stuff, BUDS, Navy SEALs and stuff like that. Like, oh, wouldn't that be a great fitness program? No, that's like the worst fitness program because most people are going to quit or break. And that's what it's supposed to do. The elite special forces training isn't supposed to get you in shape. You're already in shape physically at that point. They're just saying, all right, 90% of you aren't going to make it. We're here to get you to quit and break. We want you to break and quit. And whoever's left, okay, fine, you can be a Navy SEAL. That's not a good fitness plan because it's engineered to break people. And so usually when we've got these big programs that get very popularized as extreme and everything, and we think, oh, if it's extreme, once again, this is a formulaic false flag. Oh, it's so extreme. It's so incredible. Oh my gosh, I couldn't walk for days. Does that mean it's effective? No. It's just simply weeding out people who can't do that for one reason or another. Yes, sure, performance enhancing drugs can help with that. But even then, you're not looking at the people who are on performance enhancing drugs who are destroyed by it. Always remember, success is very loud. We hear of the success of the 1% to 2% of people who can make it to whatever level. But we never hear of the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who failed. And that's the reality most of us are going to face. So that's why a real, true, effective, practical training program is something that's not going to be extreme. It's not going to break us most of the time, and because we can do it. And the high level, elite, super extreme stuff probably isn't going to be at that level. So keeping on that as well, we covered formula. The other thing that's a big false flag is fatigue. Okay, how much can you ruin your body? How much can you drive yourself into the ground? I have this theory that people really like this false idea because we like to feel that we got ourselves beat up. And usually, and this is something I used to do too, but this is a sign of incompetence. I'm the hardest worker in the room. Yeah, because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what it takes to get the results you want. Therefore, the only game you've got to play, the only card you can play is beat yourself into submission. And that was my case. Like, I want to work so hard I can barely walk the next day. I want to be sweating so much. I want to be so completely spent and exhausted in my training that I'm totally worthless for the rest of the day. Why did I want that? Because I didn't know what I was doing and how to train smarter. So all I had to go on was, can I leave it all in the gym? Now, of course, yes, hard training and even effective training is going to be fatigue inducing. And yes, there are going to be times when you're like, oh my gosh, that really felt hard. It really crushed me. But no, that does not mean it was effective. As I've learned the hard way, it is entirely possible and very probable in many cases for you to absolutely destroy yourself, to kick your own ass in the gym every single time you work out and still go absolutely nowhere. In fact, that's usually what happens because, as I'll explain in a little bit, hard work doesn't produce results. Effective work does. And you can have effective work and you can have ineffective work, and it's both going to kick your ass. How much effort you put into it is not at all a discerning variable in knowing if it was effective or not. And there are lots of ways you can even make it harder and less effective, as a matter of fact. So yes, you fatigue. It's a very satisfying thing for me to go up for a bike ride and come back and be like, oh man, I'm just going to Netflix and chill for the rest of the night. I'm totally spent. Great, fine. Yeah, like muscle soreness. Enjoy the fact that you worked hard. You've earned it. But it's by no means an indicator that your workout actually moved the needle closer to the goals that you were after. Okay. So let's get into a couple more questions here. Paul. Hey, Matt, have you ever worked with people who have metabolic disorders like type 1 diabetes? How do you know if someone's had an effective workout if they have to stop and can't continue the same day? Very good question. So usually whenever we trainers are working with someone with any sort of condition, diabetes or sort of osteoporosis, that sort of thing, we always farm out, at least we should, to other healthcare professionals. Chances are if I met someone and working with them on type 1 diabetes, because it's not always the same. I know some people with type 1 diabetes and it's like, okay, you need to train this way and eat that way. But I could meet someone else with type 1 diabetes and it's totally different. It's not like there's one solid game plan play because of course there's all other variables. Like what's your lifestyle like? How does your body handle different things? How does your body like to handle exercise? Some people I've worked with who, they'll be like, oh, my body just handles my blood sugar a lot better if I do mostly strength training. Other people, it's if I do mostly cardio kind of thing. There's no like set game plan, even though it seems like a very stable, steady, like this is what type 1 diabetes does to the body. Therefore, this is the way you should train. But there's so many other compounding variables that one, I'm going to ask the individual because chances are very good they're more of an expert on what's best for them than I am. And because they've lived with the disease for a lot longer. One of my old mentors was a type 1 diabetic since he was a child. So if he was like, okay, I've got to go and take this blood sugar reading, or I need to make sure I eat this today and stuff, I'm like, you know better, dude. You're the one who's had this condition for your entire life. You know how to manage it better than I do. So usually I'll defer to the individual themselves and be like, you know how to handle this. And I always tell clients this, you know your body better than I do. If you're getting a little dizzy and woozy and stuff like that, you tell me and we say, okay, then we need to start stepping it down a little bit, or maybe get you some orange juice or something in order to boost that blood sugar back up. So I'll defer to them. And if it's really something complicated, I'll defer to their dietitian, their physician. I'll call out and say, okay, I'm going to be working with this person. Is there anything you want to make sure I pay attention to? And they're like, yeah, they're good for hard exercise for 20 minutes, but that's about it. I'm like, okay, great, good to know. And then I'll be able to plan the workouts out accordingly. So yeah, it's not me making the decisions. It's the person and the doctors and stuff, because they know better than I do. And then it's just up to me to make sure that the workout is in alignment with the conditions that they've brought to me. All right. I'll get into the meat and potatoes after a couple more questions here. Dan is kind of asking, hey, Matt, loved your book on overcoming isometrics. Thank you very much. And ordering my ISO chain next week. Smart investment, my friend. Been using that a lot myself these days, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Is there much of a difference between a 3-set, 12-second program versus a 6x6? Very good. So refer back to my program podcast a couple of weeks ago. I talked about how I was making overcoming isometrics a bigger part of my strength training career. And it's been only 2 weeks now, and it's absolutely been game-changing. It's totally fantastic. And if you folks out there, if you want to give isometrics a try, invest in a simple ISO trainer from WorldFit. Description down below on that one. And that can get you started. But if you really want to take your isometric strength training to the next level, get yourself an ISO chain for sure. It's a totally different animal. But what I talked about in that program is that holding for longer periods of time can be more satisfying for the potential stimulation for muscle growth. You're just creating more fatigue in the muscle. So the 3 sets of 12 seconds is very similar to what I'm kind of doing now, which is 3 sets of 15 seconds. I was starting off with the Tabata thing, and I think I was kind of overdoing it a little bit. That was quite a lot of volume, and it was completely kicking my ass. I think that was a bit much. So now I'm using more of a 3 sets of 15. It's a pretty good amount, but for an isometric, 15 seconds is quite a long time to be holding. Versus a 6x6, now you're going to be focusing a little bit more on the volume's about the same, but it's not going to be driving the muscles quite to the same level of fatigue in each set. So it might feel a little bit more fresh for each set. Usually, my experience or my play on that is experience it. Do both, and you probably are going to get some feedback on which one is just drastically better. Like, wow, that's so much better to do it this way. And if you're not getting feedback like that, then it probably doesn't matter. That sort of idea. Let's see. I know I missed a few of these before. Sorry if I've skipped questions here, folks. The feed is somewhat limited here. Hey, Matt, I always had trouble with time practice set or reps for time and not racing the clock. Now I figured being faster is a specific skill instead of doing the same thing in less time. Yeah, exactly. And this is going, again, for the time duration of, is time part of the goal itself? Is it something that you want to be able to do for a certain amount of time or a certain amount of work in a certain period of time? And if that's not that important to you, then don't worry too much about it as well. All right, last one coming up here after this question. Brian asking, hey, Matt, question about farmer's walks. Would it be best to go lower in weights if I'm still sore the next 2 days after? keep doing 2-mile walks. Wow, that's a long way to go, man. And weighted vest or keep going. I would take it a little bit on the lighter side for sure. Or hell, don't even do it. Just go for regular walks kind of thing. Because again, you were sore because of damage. Okay? If you've got a sore ankle from twisting your ankle, you don't be like, well, I'll just go for a shorter walk. It's like, no, you got to let that sucker heal up kind of thing. So don't be in such a hurry to damage the muscle further, because that's the thing with any sort of damage to the body is when it is damaged, it's easier to damage it further. And generally, we want to keep the mindset of damage is detrimental. Pain is weakness, as I always tell my clients. So you want to get out of pain as quickly as possible. So if you waited a few days for that farmer walk and let yourself recover a lot more and then could do it without pain, you're probably going to have a much stronger, better farmer walk than if you had rushed it a little bit. So that's why I'm always a big fan of like, wait a little bit. You're not losing out on anything if you wait for your muscles to not be sore anymore. It's something that is, your adaptation cycle is much longer than we give it credit for. It's not like, oh, I got to hit my muscle every 24 to 48 hours. Like, give it a week. You're still fine from that sort of thing. So give yourself plenty of recovery, my friend. Pain is weakness. And while it is a consequence sometimes of our workouts, we want to make sure that we are not having unnecessary pain. All right, guys, I'm going to fix my camera here. I try to get this right, but apparently the weather here in Denver is just not playing nice. So I'm going to just set that on auto and hopefully it's going to adjust on its own. I think that's a lot better. Now you can see my beautiful, gorgeous face much better, or make yourself sick, whatever you like to think of. So anyway, we've got our last false positive here, false positive number 6, and then I'm going to go into the 3 things that are positive signs of a good, effective workout, and that is that of performance. So this is really hard to kind of look at and be like, well, how could that possibly be a bad thing? If I'm adding weight or adding reps or I run the mile faster, isn't that a good thing? Usually it is. However, we must always be aware of the threat of compensation, compensatory patterns and habits. And this can be a very subliminal thing that can creep up on us over time and we don't even notice it. And so what we're doing is we're subconsciously trying to compensate, oftentimes technique, but we can do other things like speed or even just making changes to our program in such a way that our numbers go up, but we're actually going backwards in several other ways. So let's say, for example, you're like, okay, push-ups. I want to be able to do a lot of push-ups. And you start off with like real good, close in, pausing at the bottom, solid military style push-ups. But then over time, you're like, do you really need to go all the way to the floor? I'm getting close. I'm getting to within a fist width. That's good enough. And okay, let's move my hands out. My elbows are out like this. And actually, if I start bobbing my head a little bit, then it feels like I'm getting more range of motion than I actually am. And I'm keeping my hips low to the ground. So you're actually only lifting up your torso. You're not lifting your hips as much and blah, blah, blah. And before you know it, you're like, yay, I've tripled the amount of push-ups I can do, but your technique is so much easier. How much are you actually stronger? Now, it's not to say that you totally didn't accomplish anything, but it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 7/8 steps back. You still maybe make a little bit of progress, but it's a bit of a false flag as far as how much you actually have. Again, I'm thinking of like the guy in the gym with a bar full of plates in the squat rack, and he's just doing like tiny little bends with his knees kind of things. And my grind style approach is always like, I want the numbers low. I don't chase reps. I don't chase weight. If anything, I like it when things go down because it means I'm going the opposite way. I want to make the exercise harder. I want to use difficult, challenging techniques. I don't want to do 100 push-ups. I want to be struggling to do 10 because of the harder technique I'm using. So yeah, by all means, chart your progress, chart your performance, look at those metrics, but have a much bigger, more inclusive view of those metrics. Don't just look at one thing and be like, hey, my weight is down, or hey, I'm doing more reps, or hey, I'm lifting more weight than before. It's like, yeah, but also look at some of the other subjective variables and see if you're compensating somewhat. And it's not even bad to purposely compensate. Like powerlifters, when they do board presses on bench press, they'll have stacks of 2x4s and boards there, so they're not coming all the way down. So they can handle more weight, but they know it. It's like, yeah, I'm purposely making the exercise easier. So I've got more weight on the bar, so my joints and everything get used to lifting that heavier weight. And then I progress by using less boards, so I'm increasing my range of motion. It's like my table of progressive elements in smart bodyweight training. There's a lot of things we can do to progress a technique. It's never just one or two things. It's not all weight and reps. So by being aware of more of these things, you stand a greater chance of progression and less of a chance of getting fooled by compensatory things that bring your performance numbers up, but you're actually not making as much progress as you might think. All right. Oh, yeah, storm is blowing in. It's crazy. As soon as I start a podcast, it's bright and sunny and all the lighting in my apartment is perfect. And then the storm starts blowing in as soon as I start recording. And it's like, oh, it's getting dark out there again. But those are the 6 things. 6 things. We got sweat, which is an indicator of temperature, not necessarily whether or not you're burning a lot of fat and calories. You've got muscle soreness, usually more from a novel stimulus rather than an effective stimulus. And if anything, you're probably better off minimizing muscle damage so you can have as much potential to grow and build yourself up rather than just stay in this loop of recovery and getting back to baseline. Time, use the amount of time necessary to get the job done. Your workout's not effective because you work out for an hour or 2 hours or a certain amount of time or a certain amount of volume. 3 is following the workout formula. Yes, of course, you need a plan. You want to have some sort of an objective, but you're not necessarily effective just because you follow the right optimized plan, especially when you got off the internet. 5 is fatigue. Yes, you're going to be sore or tired and kind of worn out, especially with a longer duration, higher intensity exercise. But fatigue just means that you did a lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you actually trained to be better. And then finally, performance. Good if your numbers are going up, but it doesn't necessarily mean all that we think it sometimes does due to compensation. So these are the 6 things that, yeah, they can be satisfying and stuff, and they can be fun, but don't exactly lean on any of them to say, well, these happened or I did it this way, therefore my workout is effective. Instead, we want to look at 3 things as the compass needles that point us towards if the workout actually was effective. And you could have all of those happen or none of them happen necessarily in making those 3 things happen as well. So this is in reference to my book, Micro Workouts. Link is down below for that one. It's one of my best-selling books. And the whole idea behind the Micro Workouts book isn't to make working out take less time and effort. If anything, it's not the goal at all, because I know a lot of times in the micro workouts you see on YouTube videos and stuff, people are like, okay, you're just going to do the circuit and you're going to do these exercises as fast as you can. You're going to race through it real quick. And boom. And that's going to be a great fast workout. I'm like, yeah, if you want to rush through the process. But my take on micro workouts is if you can understand what you're truly trying to accomplish in your workout, then chances are you can get rid of a whole lot of wasted time and fluff that usually bloats out the common workout. And now, instead of, thinking I've got to work out for so long or anything, you're just focusing on the 20% of what you were doing that was effective. And even if you doubled that, your workout is still 60% shorter and it's twice as effective. That's the idea behind micro workouts. And there are 3 fundamental objectives when it comes to exercise and training. You accomplish these 3 or one of these 3, your workout's effective. Full stop. Okay, so objective number 1, this is the easiest one, is if you are doing exercise and physical activity for the sake of burning fat and calories and weight control, because we do that. And I know that people are like, you can't out-train a bad diet and everything, which is complete BS. Of course you can. I've done it many times. Most people do it every day. But yes, exercise can certainly be an effective way to burn off calories, for sure. But the thing is, we often think, again, that we have to work out a certain way in order to do that. We have to work out a certain amount of time or do a certain type of exercise like cardio, or we have to break a sweat and all these sorts of things. But here's the good news, is that anything you do burns calories. There's no such thing as weight loss or fat burning exercise, because everything is weight loss or fat burning exercise. Literally, me moving my hands like this is increasing my calorie burn to some degree. I am burning more fat doing this and waving my hands in front of the camera than if I was just sitting and watching Netflix on my computer. So you don't need to worry about, is this going to be effective for burning fat and calories? Because I guarantee you it is. Literally do anything at all. Of course, the two variables that come into play on ensuring that happens to a higher degree are time and tension. The harder you work, the faster you burn calories, and the longer you work, the more calories you burn as well. So sure, absolutely. If you're like, would it be better if I worked out for 7 hours or 7 minutes? I'm like, well, 7 hours, dude, you're going to burn a lot more in 7 hours, but you also have to be practical. Is it going to be good, for your lifestyle and your schedule to work out for 7 hours and stuff? Or can you even do 7 hours of exercising? Like, not so much. I'm like, well, then it's not a good option, of course. But literally do whatever you can, however you like, with any type of activity on a daily basis, and it's going to work. That is the easiest objective to achieve, is that calorie burn. And then you can do the whatever you want: walk, run, jog, play with the dog, play pickup basketball. Pickleball is getting popular these days. Do kettlebells, do calisthenics, take up martial arts, climb trees, rock climbing. Literally anything will work to accomplish that objective. So that one's kind of like a, how do I know if this is working? If you're moving, it's working. All right. So objective number 2, that is for calories and stuff. Objective number 2 is proficiency. And this one's much more specific, way more specific, because it's proficiency of what? Juggling flaming chainsaws, being able to rock climb, being able to throw a baseball more effectively and stuff. So this is where it helps to have a coach. But if you are doing an exercise or training with the goal of, I want to perform at a higher level, I want to be more proficient at something, what you want to do is, when you're doing your training, you're trying to physically get better at the activity you're doing. And it helps to have something in the back of your mind that you're working on. Like me and my martial arts, like, okay, I'm working on my side kicks now. What am I trying to do in my side kicks? I'm trying to tuck my knee up closer to my chest when I chamber for a side kick. It's kind of a little bit low, especially when I get tired, it starts to drop down a little bit. Okay, so now I go and I start practicing my side kick, like chamber the knee to the chest, knee to the chest as I kick, knee to the chest as I kick, knee to the chest as I kick. As long as I'm thinking that in my head and I'm trying to do that thing better, I'm creating the effective stimulus to make an effective workout. It's that simple. And of course, it depends on, there's a million things I could think of for a side kick to improve upon. So it depends on what you're doing and how you're trying to improve it and what you're trying to do. So it's much more specific, especially to the technique itself. But as long as you're thinking in the back of your mind, I'm trying to get better at doing this thing, and this is the specific thing I'm trying to do in order to do that, then you're creating a stimulus. And then it just boils down to practicing however much you deem necessary to get better at doing that. And that's how training works. Training is trying. If you try to do something to a higher level and you're placing the demand on your body will adapt to that demand accordingly. So that's for a specific thing. It could be literally anything at all. So that's why it also helps to have a coach for whatever you're trying to do, because the coach will be, you need to work on doing X. You're like, okay, when I run, I need to have more kick, glutes and hamstrings engagement. When I'm sprinting, I need to move my arms more, or what have you. Whatever it is, that specific thing is what you're trying to do. And that's for the second objective, which is performance. Let me get to some more questions here. Abraham saying, do you agree high volume is more effective for calisthenics? Effective for what? There's a million different things. Endurance? Sure, why not? But basically, always remember that our adaptation is to be able to do the thing we're asking our body to do. So is high volume calisthenics more effective? Absolutely, for doing high volume calisthenics, because fundamentally, that's all the body understands. We've come into this fitness world thinking that exercise is an effective and reliable way to change our bodies many different ways. But fundamentally, all exercise really is you instructing your body, hey, I need you to be able to do this thing this way. And your body adapts in order to say, okay, I can give you the abilities to do that thing that way. And that's all exercise really actually is supposed to do. That's all it really is supposed to, and it always works. It's 100% effective. That's why when I started this podcast, I kind of made a note to myself, like, always remember, tell people there's no such thing as an ineffective workout. Everything you do works 100% of the time for every single person with 100% efficacy. Efficacy, I think that's the word. Everything works perfectly well every single time. The challenge is our expectations of what it's supposed to do versus what Mother Nature knows it's actually supposed to do don't always line up. We could be doing those push-ups and be like, I'm trying to build up a bigger, beefier chest. There's nothing about push-ups that tells your chest to get bigger, because there's no such thing as an aesthetic demand when it comes to any type of training. But that's why we get lured into fitness. There's no such thing as a shrinking exercise, a bulking exercise, a toning exercise, all this stuff that is about getting our body to look differently. None of that's reliable whatsoever, because you could take 1,000 people, give them all the same exercise and workout program, and every single one of them will get better at doing the thing 100% of the time. It is guaranteed. It's never failed. But some people will get bigger, some people will get smaller. So one guy will be like, dude, killer triceps. The other guy's like, I can't get my arms to grow at all. Like, it's all over the place aesthetically because there's so many other variables to it. But fundamentally, exercise is purely about getting you to be able to do the thing. So that's why the fundamental objective of I want to get better at doing the thing works so incredibly well, is because if you kind of try to do the thing better by knowing specifically how you're trying to do it better, you will start to do it better eventually. It always works. But when it comes to I want to shape, sculpt, tone, and all those other things, that comes down to a lot of other factors than what you're doing in your workout as well. All right. So the third objective, and this is where things get a little bit more funky, is potentially, talking about aesthetics and stuff, is muscle and strength. It's one you could say is, no, the first one was about kind of fat, size, weight kind of objective, sort of. And the other one's purely about performance, which is 100% reliable. And then we've got muscle size and shape and sculpting and everything like that. And for that, it's sort of a combination of the two. Is that when we are looking at muscle, fundamentally, there's only two variables you got. Okay, there's how much tension is in the muscle and how long is it there for, time and tension. Every strength exercise, or any exercise really, when it comes down to muscular adaptation, boils down to those two variables, is how much tension is in the muscle and how long is it there for relative to rest. And so every variable you have, what exercise you're doing, your programming and everything, is just simply an influence to how hard is the muscle working, either as far as contractile force and duration. And so when we have objectives of A, muscular strength, that's kind of a performance thing where muscular strength is just how hard is the muscle contracting. All we got to do is find a way to make the muscle contract harder. You're going to get stronger. And again, 100% works every single time to at least some degree. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your training is. If you can get your muscle to reliably contract harder, you're guaranteed to get stronger. It always works. The other is time and endurance. So if you're like, okay, I can do this thing with a certain amount of tension. Now I'm trying to increase my duration of what I can do with it. And again, 100% time always works because it's a functional demand. Your body will always adapt to accommodate functional demand to at least some degree. 100% of the time, it works every single time. But when we're talking about muscle and size and shape and everything like that, that's a lot more of a murky picture. So muscular demand, it's like I need to build strength or endurance. That's a lot easier to go for. But muscular size, that's not nearly as reliable, because you could have, again, 1,000 people do the same thing, and some people will get bigger, some people won't get bigger at all. Some people will lose weight. Some people, it's like, dude, my arms got smaller. What the hell? It's like, yeah, I don't know. That's sort of thing going on. But generally, when it comes down to muscular stimulus, right now, the science is suggesting that as long as we're working the muscle with a decent amount of tension, so it's not like you're just walking around or lifting a pencil or something, and you're pushing the muscle endurance to the point where you're working hard. A lot of people use the term hard sets. So you're like, "Argh." It doesn't necessarily need to be failure or anything, but you're really pushing the muscular work capacity. That's about as good as we can get as far as our understanding of what might create a reliable stimulus for building muscle. And again, you can do that any way you want. Do any kind of exercise, any kind of workout program, high volume, low volume, split training, whole body, whatever. I don't care. It probably doesn't matter very much unless it matters to you. Like, I don't like whole body workouts. I like to do split training. Fine, then do split training. As long as you're just working the muscle either harder for strength, more for endurance, or work in the work capacity as a whole and challenging that, you're probably going to stand your best bet at creating a stimulus for growth. And you just, like I said, you do that any way you want, any which way you want, any exercise you want, any tools. I don't like calisthenics. I want to work on bands, or I want to just lift logs in the middle of the forest. It's like, great, whatever. It doesn't really matter because muscles are just no time and tension. So all you got to do is manipulate those two things. And I leave you to be able to just say, what is the fastest and best way you know to do that for your experience? And if you're like, oh, wow, I do this exercise this way, my muscle works so much harder. Great. That's probably a sign you're going in the right direction then, if you're going after that. And that sort of idea. Hey, my buddy Tony Briscoe, good to see you, my friend. Appreciate the knowledge. I think my workouts have been effective. I'll see you soon, my friend. Absolutely. First week of August, what I'm looking at. Great. Can't wait to see you, Tony. Very good to hear from you as well. I've been working with Tony for, a better part of a year now, I think, Tony. And he's been making unbelievable progress. He's such a hard worker. He's got a good head on his shoulders. It's always a pleasure to see him and see all the progress that he's been making as well. So, all right, folks. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of perspective, is that when we are looking to make our workouts effective, all we need to do is focus on accomplishing those three fundamentals. I don't care about any other variables. I don't care about any other. You change your workout any way you want, however you want to do it. It really probably doesn't matter very much to me. You're probably going to find that you just naturally have an affinity for certain exercises, certain types of training, certain ways of exercising and stuff. Do whatever you want, because essentially those fundamental objectives, they're like a compass needle. They're not going to tell you how you need to exercise. They're not going to tell you how you should be working out. That's your job to figure it out. Or as a coach, if I'm working with you, it's my job to help you figure it out. And all I'm going to do is be like, that's our objective, whether we're trying to just burn more calories, work on the muscular work capacity, or the specific skill of the activity itself. And all we need to do is be like, okay, let's get creative. How are we going to make this happen for you? And oftentimes what I'll do is just start off with, well, what are some of the challenges you have? What are some of the things that have prevented you from being able to fulfill those three objectives? And usually, like when working with the individual with the type 1 diabetes, they know a lot better than I do, because they're the ones with the lifelong experience. And they're like, oh, I keep trying to do this and I can't seem to do that. No, I keep trying to get to the gym, but the gym is so impractical and it's out of the way and I don't like going to the gym and stuff. We're like, okay, great. There's a challenge there. No gym. Great. Wonderful. All we got to do is figure out, how do we put the pieces together in order to get you to further satisfy those three fundamental objectives. And if we can do that, it should be pretty obvious, right? You just go out for a walk. Did you burn fat and calories? Yep, good, success, effective, good. Time under tension, time and tension for the muscle. Did your muscles work really hard for a decent amount of time, or did you progress either of those? Yep, okay, effective, good. I don't care how long it took. I don't care if you sweat. I don't care if you're sore the next day. Did your muscles work progressively harder than the last time? Yeah, okay, good, effective. And then, did you improve something about your ability to do whatever you're trying to do? Yeah, I was able to get my chest to the bar during my pull-ups, whereas I wasn't before. Good, effective. And that's it. And I know that doesn't seem quite as satisfying. It doesn't like literally hit you in the gut the next day, like, oh my gosh, I felt that so much. It really kind of has this sense of like, that's it? That's all it takes? Yeah, that's all it takes. It doesn't feel like a whole lot of something, but it is the stimulus that is making your workouts effective. And it's pretty self-evident when it does happen as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of perspective and a compass needle to follow as well. But I will leave you folks to the rest of your weekend. Hopefully you're staying cool out there, my friends. Heat waves abound. This is the last hot day here in Denver for a little bit, and then it's going to cool off to a whole 90 degrees tomorrow. And that's cool for out here, but make sure to stay cool, drink plenty of water, stay in the shade, and take good care of yourselves, okay? Because nobody got in better shape just by beating themselves up. And always remember that pain is weakness. So thank you very much, folks, for coming on in. I'll talk to you next week. Till then, be fit and live free.